What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So last week, there was a lot of talk around Nintendo looking to shut down the 3DS and the Wii U eShop going into 2023. But there was also a new report that was published that's actually pointing to things getting worse in the coming years, even if you're someone who's already purchased and downloaded several of the games from those eShops. We're gonna go over that here today. Also, we are gonna be talking about the next N64 game that is heading to the service this week that more people should try out. And we're also gonna talk about the latest portable GameCube system, that being the Steam Deck. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps that a ton. And if you're new here to the SpawnWave channel, make sure you subscribe down below and ring that notification bell so you can keep up to date with all the uploads here on the channel. And we're gonna start today with Microsoft and Activision, a massive deal that was announced that blew up online. People were, of course, trying to go over all the possibilities as to what's going to happen with Call of Duty and how are these studios going to create differently under Microsoft's leadership. But there was also a lot of questions around kind of the timeline and how things worked out. Well, as we're going through this process, there is a lot of filings happening at the SEC, one of which kind of goes over when these talks started. We can see this posted up, this over on CNBC, who spotted the filing, saying Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella reached out to Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick about a potential deal days after a media report saying Kotick had been aware of misconduct at the game publisher. In fact, it was about 3 days after that explosive report hit the internet around misconduct at Activision. It does appear when Phil Spencer said, hey, we're going to reach out and reevaluate our relationship with Activision Blizzard, he wasn't kidding. At that point, they obviously saw weakness and thought, hey, maybe we can get them at a cheaper value. And I mean, that appears to be what's happened. Remember, that stock price really started to tank. And at that point, Microsoft was like, hey, let's grab them at a discount. And at least that's how things are lining up now. So while we look at these, video games, it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of business going on in the background at the same time. Also, we've been talking about these Lego sets from time to time, whether it's Sonic or recently Horizon Forbidden West. But we did have like that big NES set that was really cool. And it looks like there's a couple of other Lego sets for Nintendo coming up. There was a leak. We can see this posted up. This recorded by Nintendo Life. However, it appears that it's from Eugene Toy and Hobby. And we can see the list of the different sets here. These are under the codename Leaf. That's the same codename used for all the products in that line. And we do have one that's $229.99. And that kind of lines up with the original Nintendo set. And hey, maybe we could see like a Super Nintendo set, maybe a Nintendo 64 set. I mean, it seems like the Super Nintendo set would be next up, just kind of based on the release of the systems in chronological order. There's also a bunch of other sets there that may line up with a different Mario set or something. But yeah, apparently keep an eye out, as it looks like Nintendo and Lego are gearing up for some more announcements. Oh, and we did have some news out of Retro Studios that really got the internet buzzing. They changed their Twitter profile banner. No, seriously, here it is. Yeah, once that hit the internet, exploded online. People were trying to figure out what's going on, and I think I cracked the code. It looks like they're working on a Metroid game. I know, it sounds out there, but we'll see what happens in the coming year. Now, it's obviously they're getting ready, I think, to talk about probably, yes, either that Metroid Remaster remake or maybe right into Metroid Prime 4. We're still trying to figure out when that thing's even going to make another appearance, since the last time we saw it in its logo format was back in 2017. Yes, so this summer will have been 5 years since Metroid Prime 4 was revealed. Of course, they basically rebooted it just about 3 years ago, but still, it's been a long time. So I am ready to see Retro Studios wake up. It appears they're getting ready to. Maybe the next Direct over the summer, if there's not an E3, maybe during Summer Game Fest, and then we see them show off the original Metroid Prime, maybe the trilogy or something, and then we get that big grand reveal of Metroid Prime 4. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with the Nintendo eShop for the 3DS and the Wii U that are basically on track to be shut down overall by March 2023, but in just 3.5 months or so, you won't be able to use your credit or debit cards. And for a lot of people, I think that's when it's mostly going to close. Otherwise, you got to get like the eShop cards from the store, punch those in. Then a few months after that, you have to use a shared wallet with your main Nintendo account now. And that's a whole process. Basically, as soon as it becomes inconvenient to buy stuff there, I think most people are just going to kind of move on unless there's something they desperately need off of there. But it looks like there is now a report out there pointing to the potential of you not even be able to re-download your games a couple of years after that 2023 deadline. We can see this posted up on Nintendo Life, which I will link down in the sources. There is a lot of talk around some of the other back-end details for Nintendo, even with like repairs on the Wii U or upgrading from the Wii and the Wii U. Some interesting stuff there. They say NCL has been waiting for this day since 2014. A former NOA employee talks Nintendo eShop closures. They say Nintendo knows it has to support a product for a minimum of 10 years or they risk some class action. Now, apparently the source wishes to remain anonymous, obviously. If they had been working at Nintendo of America, Nintendo will come after them, and yeah, obviously, I'm sure NDAs were signed. But I also want to bring up the fact that, I mean, it's an anonymous source. I would like to think Nintendo Life does vet this completely. Like, there are ways you can, of course, identify if someone has really been working at a place for a set time period. So I'm going to lean towards the idea that Nintendo Life did vet this person and that they did work at Nintendo America at some point, at least. They say internally, NCL has been waiting for that day since 2014 based on sales. Nintendo looks at the first 2 years as the indicator of when to start packing it in with a console. That makes sense because you would want to figure out if, okay, are we going to be developing a large Zelda experience or Mario experience for a system after 2 years or so, because you're going to be restarting your development cycles and figure out, is it going to be on this system or the next one? And well, I mean, look, the Wii U just didn't do that well out of the gate or really at all. However, the big piece of information comes down to the full end-of-life process and that ability to re-download previous purchases. And according to their source, they say they will give notice in 2023 that the server will be shut down after a time. After this time, the suggestion is that online play re-downloads of purchased contents and everything else will disappear entirely. People will 100% lose their games if something happens to their Wii U or the drive they have their games on. Nintendo Life did reach out to Nintendo and they basically just passed along the answer that they gave when they were going through that Q&A, saying for the foreseeable future, it will still be possible to re-download games and DLC, receive software updates, and enjoy online play on Wii U and Nintendo 3DS family of systems. So I do think eventually you just won't have online play for the Wii U and the 3DS. Like, I don't think in 20 years or something it's possible. I don't even think people would expect that to be the case, but I will admit, not be able to re-download something you had purchased even 3 or 4 years from now would be a little jarring. And we were trying to figure out with the Wii specifically, like we were talking on the podcast even over the weekend with MVG, trying to figure that out. And he even asked on Twitter, and some people pointed out that if you don't have your original Wii, you can't download stuff, but if you do, you can still download some of the purchases that you've made. And one person even posted up a screenshot of that happening. But I guess the idea here is after, let's say, this re-download thing kicks in and you cannot do that based on your account, which is something that was brought up here with the older account system not being necessarily compatible as they're going forward with this new Nintendo account system they have attached to the Switch, which brings in their subscription service and their current ecosystem. If you lost your Wii U, let's say it got damaged in some way, maybe you have it in the basement, it floods, and there goes your Wii U, and you get a new one, you wouldn't necessarily be able to re-download all of those purchases you may be making right now in anticipation of the shutdown in 2023. Really, I just wanted to bring this to your attention because while this is an anonymous source, again, I'd like to think that Nintendo Life at least vetted their presence within Nintendo of America for a time period that would line up with this. It's still something to consider since a lot of people are rushing to get all of the digital games. I said I think it's a better idea to get the physical copies, even if they're like $10 or $20 more, just in case we get to this point where, like, you can't even re-download the stuff if you don't have your original Wii U, maybe the drive that plugs into it, or your 3DS. So just keep this in mind as we head towards that 2023 closure in March, because then maybe a few months later, maybe the following year, we hear from Nintendo that the entire thing really is just getting completely sunset. Next up, let's talk about the Nintendo 64 and that expansion pack for the Switch, as we now found out when the next big title, that being Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, is heading to the service. We can see this posted up by Nintendo of America, saying Link is dragged into the world of Termina, where the moon is falling from the sky. Relive the world's final 72 hours when Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask comes to Nintendo Switch for Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack members on February 25th. That'll be this Friday. And I've seen a lot of people online mention they haven't even really played Majora's Mask. And I did say, I think it's the best N64 Zelda game. And I know there are a lot of people who are like couldn't believe it. Like, it's like, no, Ocarina of Time is there. Yes, Ocarina of Time is very good. I think, though, Majora's Mask is much more interesting to revisit right now. Like, just the concepts that they were trying to really put in place here. It wasn't perfection by any means when it came to just the 72-hour period that they had, and you would keep going back in time, you would slow time, you'd speed up time, and it was pretty cool to have that, but also the different masks that you would get, and I'd say the storyline or the backstory to some of the characters that you would basically take their form and actually act out parts of their lives. It was very dark, actually. Like different characters would try to come to terms with loss, and probably the darkest Zelda game I've ever played, but I think it's also the most mature game to go back and play in the Zelda series, and certainly one to check out if you already have the online service, that expansion pack, and it's showing up on the 25th. Yeah, check it out, see what you think. I am going to be curious about the overall emulation, as people are pointing out that it already has like some transparency issues with the fog like we had with Ocarina of Time, but we'll see when it drops later on this week. It has had issues with crashing on the GameCube version when they had like the kind of the collection for The Legend of Zelda. So as long as it's nothing too bad like that, I think it's definitely worth checking out even right now in 2022. Next up, let's talk about the Steam Deck, which is a handheld that I hope I can have before the end of the year, as they're looking to just kind of fill shipments in waves heading through 2023. So fingers crossed on that one, but there was a tweet that was posted up that got people pretty excited because it does kind of lean into the value proposition of the Steam Deck outside of even just Steam and playing PC games. You can see this posted up by Dolphin Emulator, and yeah, that's a Steam Deck. It's running a GameCube game. It appears to be F-Zero. And I'm not sure how they got the Steam Deck so they can work on it. That's great news though, because they'll, I'm sure, be able to tweak and play around with some of the settings and updates and stuff, and we could have a very capable portable GameCube machine here with the Steam Deck, and that's something I'd be curious to see what the battery life would be on that. Could we get like a 3, 4, even 5-hour battery life out of a GameCube game playing on the Steam Deck? And of course, what kind of performance could we expect out of it? Because the Steam Deck is going to have the same hardware when it comes to the GPU and the CPU across the board for an entire community that comes together, and yeah, might actually work to update and optimize Dolphin for that handheld, whereas typically you have these third-party handhelds come out and they all have different configurations, and it's a chore really to get the plugins and all the stuff working, whereas we could have like a Steam Deck version of Dolphin. That would be cool. And of course, we could even get like Wii U games on here at some point through Cemu, and then you could see, I would say, all kinds of games playable on the Steam Deck. Backups, of course, right? But it's exciting stuff. The Steam Deck being $400, $500, $600, depending on where you want the storage capacity to be, is still a great deal compared to third-party handhelds that can be over $1,000. So I'm already excited for the Steam Deck, but then I realized, wow, I have a large library of GameCube games that I could then just load onto the Steam Deck that I have, a 256 gigabyte or 512 gigabyte model, or you just drop a really large SD card in there and start loading them off of that. Again, a ton of value in the Steam Deck. I just gotta hope that I get it before the end of the year. We'll see. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Square Enix and that HD 2D style that they seem to be using quite a bit now for original titles like Octopath and Triangle Strategy, and then also going back and grabbing games that none of us were expecting from the Super Famicom generation with things like Live Alive. So interesting stuff there. And it doesn't look like that HD 2D style is going away anytime soon. In fact, it looks like Square wants to accelerate the use of it and go back and grab other games, some of which we may have never played outside of Japan. We can take a look at this. This was posted up by Game Rant, saying the Square Enix Asano development team's radio podcast isn't intended to be a place of game announcements or reveals, but the trio wasn't able to hold back everything. During their conversations, they casually acknowledged that Square Enix plans to continue working on HD 2D releases and remakes going forward. Now, they go on to say that there is like a large list of different titles. ActRaiser was one of them. We saw that. And then we, of course, have now seen Live Alive. And it does make you wonder what else could have been on that list. Could there be Emerald Dragon or Bahamut Lagoon? Maybe they go back and they say, hey, Chrono Trigger, that could use an HD 2D upgrade. We could do something there. There's a lot of possibilities when it comes to this style that they now have access to and they're just using everywhere. And it works well considering these are games that some of us have never played. I mean, I've really never gotten into Live Alive. Obviously, Bahamut Lagoon was a difficult one to play unless you were able to take the English patch and apply it to it, and then maybe you got it on real hardware and you played it there. But the idea of not only bringing the game over, but then also doing something that keeps it retro looking, but modernizes a bit with HD 2D, it's exciting. So yeah, I'm curious to see what other games we're all of a sudden gonna have released in the coming years that we thought we'd never see, and then it comes out physically, maybe published by Nintendo or something. So yeah, one of the most exciting and interesting teams to follow right now is indeed Team Asano over at Square. And that actually rolls us right into our poll question. You can see that here, where I ask, if Square were to remake or remaster Chrono Trigger, how should they do it? 55% said remake in HD 2D style, 30% said full 3D remake like Final Fantasy VII Remake, and then 16% said no remake, just a clean remaster. I guess like took the Super Nintendo version, cleaned it up a bit, and just moved it to current platforms now. HD 2D would be pretty cool to see applied to Chrono Trigger, but Final Fantasy VII Remake had that nice graphical fidelity, full 3D, much different way to look at Chrono Trigger. But if you got that, would you expect Square to do what they did with Final Fantasy VII and just change the story so they can turn it into a series? So that's the question there. Would you like to see Square go all in, make this really good looking Chrono Trigger game in full 3D, but then have them change up the story? Is it worth it to do that? And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Ted saying, stoked that FSR is showing up on Switch. Would love to see it patched into older titles as well. Looking at you, Arc. There's no saving Arc. Like, Arc's just, it's over. WWE 2K18, that one's also over. Although, did you know that game is still $60 on the eShop? I noticed that the other day. It just blows my mind that game is still full price and it's never been fixed. But you take FSR, and while it's not gonna fix certain games like those, it would be a good way to get a better frame rate out of something like Age of Calamity, a game that is very good, but does suffer from performance issues. So I'd be all for Nintendo or Koei or somebody going back and patching different games with FSR specifically to raise the frame rate. I don't know if they would do it to just make the game look better overall, but from a performance standpoint, I'm all for it right now. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button, it really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here. Today was Nintendo and the 3DS Wii U eShop. Do you really think that in like 2 or 3 years, they're just gonna cut it completely out? Like, you're not even able to re-download some of these games. Let me know your thoughts on that. And then also, what about Square and the HD 2D style? What game would you like to see them revive, remaster into that style in the coming years? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.